In today's video, I want to cover two topics that we've created multiple videos on this channel. One is the health benefits of sunlight. That's one topic we've covered in depth. And the other is the topic of red light therapy or near infrared therapy, laser therapy, the light spectrum. So there's two different topics that are combined in sunlight because sunlight literally encompasses the whole visual spectrum and the non-visual spectrum. And so in today's video, I want to share a brand new paper from the journal Nature that shows that near infrared sunlight passes completely through our body and has systemic impacts on our health on the way through. And we'll talk about research that has shown that sunlight lowers blood sugar and improves vision, regardless of whether the light actually hits your eyes or not. So it's really cool information that reinforces the importance of us not living in our cubicles, but getting outside and getting the sun exposure that our species and really all living species require in order to be healthy and functional. So let's go to it. And that paper that we're going to look at today is, again, from the journal Nature, and the title is Longer Wavelengths in Sunlight Pass Through the Human Body and Have a Systemic Impact, which does many things, but improves vision is one conclusion of this paper. And so let's jump over to the actual paper and dive into the details. So here we are on the paper, and remember, this is from Nature, the journal Nature, which is the most well-respected journal in the world, I believe. If it's not, it's right up there. And so this is an open access paper. You can type in this title right here and download it from Google in its entirety yourself to read through. And so let's dive in because, again, sunlight, especially the longer wavelengths of sunlight, have systemic health impacts. And this paper wanted to really focus in on how does it improve your vision, or does it improve your vision? And these authors had shown in the past that wavelengths of 670 nanometers improve vision. And 670, as we've talked about on previous videos, is the red light spectrum. So this is visual red light. So this is things like the red light therapy that you see on the internet, or you can order from Amazon, or you see in laser products. That red light has positive benefits on your vision, specifically seeing color and contrast. It's also been shown to lower blood sugar, and it's also been shown to increase ATP production from the mitochondria. The 670 degree, or excuse me, nanometer wavelength is the most studied wavelength in terms of health benefits of red light. So that's well established, and we've covered that in multiple videos on this channel. This paper is looking at even longer wavelengths. So longer wavelengths include the infrared spectrum. And specifically, the near infrared spectrum is what this paper is looking at. And that's going to be the 800 to 900 range. And you'll see here that they show that 850 is probably the peak or the most beneficial wavelength there. So why are we interested in this? Well, as you can see here, long wavelength red light can extend beyond the human visual range and penetrates deeply into biological tissue. Exposure to these wavelengths improves mitochondrial function and ATP production. And remember that ATP is the energy currency for human life. Okay, we need ATP in order to do anything, to heal, to grow, whatever it is. This can translate to improved physiological performance, particularly in the central nervous system, including the visual system. Light-driven metabolic improvements to regional exposure can impact systemically. So that's a big one. What the heck does that mean? That means that you don't have to point the light, the laser, the LED, near infrared panel, whatever you're using, the sunlight doesn't have to hit you in the eyes. It could hit you in the calf. You could point the laser at the calf or the red light panel at the calf and still get systemic effects. Regional exposure or local exposure on the calf has impact systemically. How and why? Well, those are things that research is still trying to elucidate clearly. But one hypothesis is that the local application of the light changes cytokine release systemically, and that creates systemic impact. And as we've talked about before, cytokines are chemical messengers in the body. So using near infrared light at a local spot on the body impacts the whole body. And in this study, it focuses on, does it impact vision? And we're going to see that it does. Another question is, well, okay, if sunlight has its impacts, does clothing reduce the impact of the light or the laser therapy? Clothing reduces the wavelength intensity, but it's not a barrier. And we'll show you that. They tested three different articles of clothing, a t-shirt, a wool shirt, and another top, and they were all penetrated by the 850 nanometer wavelength near infrared light. In fact, I'll show you that right now because it's a pretty cool image. But that image is right here. You can see it transmitted through clothing. So they use a near infrared visual camera to be able to see, does the light pass through the clothing? And this one right here is the 850 nanometer wavelength, which we can't see again with our eye visually, but the infrared camera could see it, and it passes through the clothing, no problem. And so again, this shows that the clothes are nearly 100 times more transparent to the near infrared light than to visible light, which you can see here. So yes, clothing is not a barrier, or no, clothing is not a barrier to the wavelengths that we need. However, if you remove the clothing and you get the exposure directly on the skin, there is less barrier and you get more, say, therapy or treatment from it. So let's dive in. As we've talked about many times, there's too much to read here, so I'm going to point you to downloading it and reading it all for yourself, but we'll hit the high points. And so, again, why is light important? Well, because light stimulates mitochondria. Mitochondria are light sensitive, and mitochondria again produce ATP, which is the energy our body needs for performance. Shorter wavelengths, okay, so whereas long wavelengths increase mitochondrial function and health, shorter wavelengths, 400 to 450, have the opposite effect. These are absorbed and they increase reactive oxygen species or oxidative stress or free radicals or rust, and they reduce mitochondrial function and performance. So again, not all light is the same. The 400 to 450 range, that's down in the ultraviolet range, whereas the 660 to 1000 is up in the infrared range. How would this help vision? Well, because the outer retina contains more mitochondria than any other tissue in the body. Okay, so this provides for two things. A, if we can stimulate the mitochondria, we can help improve vision. But B, because of the high metabolic rate of mitochondria and the most mitochondria being in the retina, they're most exposed to rapid aging. So what happens as we age? Many people have vision loss. Well, if we can prevent that and sustain healthy mitochondria, we can sustain or return some vision. So the long wavelength application results in improved visual function. We mentioned that the wavelengths near infrared and red can reduce blood sugar. Well, here's the research allusion to that. These wavelengths can reduce blood sugars as increase in the mitochondrial function and ATP production requires elevated demand for serum carbohydrates. So using the red light or sun exposure increases mitochondrial metabolic demand for carbs, so it's going to pull it out of the bloodstream, lowering sugar. This is an example of systemic impact because only small regions of the body are exposed significantly. Only small regions of the body are exposed, but the blood sugars are reduced significantly. So again, this is that you expose a small part of the body to impact the whole body, right? When you're outside, you don't have to be completely naked. What if just your shirt's off or your forearms and your calves are exposed and you're getting those near infrared wavelengths hitting you? regionally, but impacting whole body, reducing blood sugars, improving vision. It's awesome. So let's keep going. In this study to see, to measure does the light improve vision, they had 40 white subjects, male and female, age 25 to 63, and they did a couple different things. One, they put them out in the sun, in the June sun at midday with no top on, and they let the sun hit them in the back. And then they put a box on the subject's chest, and uh, the box was measuring for light for wavelengths that came through the body. Okay, and so that the testing showed that the sunlight that hit the patients in the back, a lot of it was attenuated, but the 850 nanometer wavelength, the near infrared wavelengths, passed through the body and was picked up by the box that was measuring for light to pass through on their chest. Again, showing that it passes through. They then did it with a human hand as well, because the hand is not as thick as a chest, so they wanted to be able to visualize that. And again, the 850 nanometer wavelengths were the ones that passed through the hand, and they showed us a picture of that here. So you can see the light transmission through the hand from an 850 nanometer LED source, so like your near infrared panel that you might use at home. The black are the veins and the deoxygenated blood, so that absorbs the light, but everything else allows it to pass through. They also, when they saw that the um, sunlight passed through the subjects, they also wanted to determine, well, cool, outside real sunlight passes through. What about LED panels of the same wavelength? So they got LED panels at 850 nanometers. And again, exposed patients' backs to the light, which they could not see because it's near infrared. And it did pass through the back and was collected by the box at the chest. So we could do it with sunlight, we could do it with LED panels. The assessment of visual function was based on color contrast detection thresholds. Color contrast was chosen because with age, the cone photoreceptors in the eye have reduced function, mainly due to mitochondrial decline. However, these cells rarely die, making them ideal for optical manipulation to improve mitochondrial performance. So again, they wanted to see the impact of the light on the eye and on these cells that do degenerate but don't die. So if we can give them what they need, they can regenerate and give us vision back. And that's what they were seeing. And so they saw sunlight hitting the back improve vision, LED light hitting the back improve vision. And they said, well, how about this though? Uh, sometimes near infrared light in a dark room, which they were doing with the LED panel people, it can still pass through the eyelid, even with the eyes closed, and impact the eyes. So they wanted to control for that. So 5 of the subjects, they wrapped their head in aluminum foil so that they could completely block light from passing through their eyelids or passing through the head at all to positively impact their vision. And they wanted to see, did those people see visual improvement? And they did as well. So again, hitting the body somewhere else other than the eyes or the head still improved vision. Say wow. So you have systemic impact from local exposure. The eyes don't even have to be involved. And there it is there saying, again, because the wavelengths can be reflected from surfaces and penetrate eyelids, even with the eyelids closed, we wanted to wrap their heads and see how did they do. So excellent, excellent study design. And they find here when you're in the sun, this is how much these are the different wavelengths in the sunlight. So from 200 to 1,000. So when all this hits your back, that's all hitting you. But on the other side of you, on your chest, the box collecting the sunlight that passes through you shows only 600 to 1,000 passes through. So that's the red light into the near infrared light spectrum, penetrates deeply and passes through. So those are the therapeutic wavelengths we want to use. Let's see what they conclude. This study shows that longer wavelengths of sunlight are transmitted through the body. When these are presented via near infrared LEDs in a laboratory, they again have the ability to pass through the body and improve visual function independent of the eyes or independent of ocular exposure. Because again, wrapping their heads in tinfoil blocked all that. Hence, body penetration by longer wavelengths impacts systemically. Longer wavelengths improve mitochondrial membrane potential and ATP production and improve function in a species conserved pattern. So what this is saying is this isn't just humans, it's mice, it's all living things. So sunlight is a nutrient independent of vitamin D. Notice we haven't even talked about vitamin D at all in this paper because vitamin D wasn't studied for this. They're looking at just the wavelengths of the light. So yes, we've made many videos on this channel talking about the health benefits of vitamin D from sunlight, but here are systemic health benefits that are independent of vitamin D. Even if your vitamin D is great, even if you sat in a dark room and took vitamin D, you still need sunlight for other reasons. And one of them, a major reason, is exposure to these long wavelengths to get the systemic health benefits that they provide. And this is species conserved or evolutionarily conserved. All life needs sunlight exposure. And again, here, the sentence is cut off, but check it out. Long wavelengths improve the mitochondria function and improve in a species conserved pattern that can impact not just eyes, mobility, your ability to move, yes, vision, yes, cognition, yes, blood sugar, as we saw above, particularly in aging. If you think of yourself as a battery, as you age, you hold a charge less and less efficiently. Well, the sunlight exposure helps you keep that charge, helps you hold your charge better, which slows your aging. So you need to literally get it in the sunlight to recharge your batteries. Taken together, these data provide evidence of the importance of full spectrum sunlight for human health. They also highlight the potential dangers of restricted spectra found in white LED lighting in the modern built environment that lacks longer wavelengths and whose output is generally restricted to 4 to 650. So this could have implications for public health. And that's very important that they said that. And let's look at that. So as we've moved away here, look, there's been a major change in the human experience of light since the introduction of LED lighting in the early 21st century. So over the last 20 years, while evolution has taken place under sunlight, the human experience is now very different. The move to a built environment has taken humans away from their evolutionary history in terms of reducing sunlight exposure. This was initially mitigated by two issues. One, we were still exposed to firelight, and light from older incandescent lighting still have longer wavelength components in them, similar enough to the sun. This is not the case for standard LED lighting used in buildings that has become to dominate over the last 20 years. In white LED lighting, whether warm or cool, there are few, if any, wavelengths over 650, and the dominant wavelength is blue at approximately 450 nanometers. Well, 420 to 450 is known to undermine mitochondrial function, particularly in the absence of infrared, which is what the current lighting, white LED lighting does. So not only is it shifting us away from getting the healthy, but it actually stimulates, it's actually the unhealthy form that damages mitochondria. Such wavelengths are intense in lighting units with color temperature of 4,000 to 5,000 Kelvin. These wavelengths not only undermine mitochondrial performance, but have an immediate effect significantly increasing human heart rate and significantly reducing blood pressure. This is most likely mediated by surface skin absorbance. Hence, as with near infrared used to control blood sugars, these lower wavelengths can have the opposite effect in terms of the near infrared helps benefit us, these shorter wavelengths hurt us. And if you're living in a cubicle, not getting real sunlight, you're being basically under a magnifying glass that is shooting you with focal light that is unhealthy for the mitochondria. And I've made videos on this, the artificial light at night. There's lots of research on that, looking at third shift workers and other workers that work third shift and never see the sun and only have lights from their buildings that don't have the good wavelengths and they're more inflamed, more sick, etc. So we want to get outside, and if you're building a home or an office and you're choosing the lighting, you want to use not the white LED lights, but you want to use the incandescent bulbs because they still have some of the longer wavelength components and are more similar to the sun. So lastly here, it is known that improving the mitochondrial function by illumination at a specific location results in distal as well as proximal effects. This is called the abscopal effect. So basically the name for, so this is saying what we started off with. If we expose one part of your body, that part isn't the only one positively affected. Every part is. So that's called the abscopal effect. If you hit one spot, you're going to hit all spots. And other research has shown that, you know, we find that mitochondria exposure in one tissue is perceived and acted upon by the mitochondrial stress response pathway in a further tissue. Clinically, it is recognized that targeted irradiation of a primary tumor can result in shrinkage of secondary tumors farther away. Such patterns are present in many reports using longer wavelengths to improve mitochondrial function, and they show that it triggers a widely communicated response. A key example of this is the exposure of red light to a limited skin region that results in a significant reduction of challenged blood sugars elsewhere, systemically. The authors argue that this arises from increased carbohydrate demand from stimulated mitochondria, but the size of the effect can only arise if mitochondria in a much wider region than was exposed to light are upregulated and increased demand. Big time research there. Awesome to show that you don't have to expose the whole body. You can expose one part and still get systemic benefits. This is awesome. Well, what about why don't I just get a big panel and live inside my house and do that and skip the sun? Well, good question. Individual near-infrared photons at wavelengths near the maximum of body transmission, so around 850 nanometers, carry about 40 times the kinetic energy of a biomolecule at body temperature. On absorption, these light photons can accelerate redox reaction rates in the mitochondria to increase ATP production. By adding the extra energy as light rather than heat, this process operates without excessive increase in tissue temperature. So this is called green chemistry in some areas. There's evidence that short periods of illumination have a long-lasting effect on mitochondrial function, extending for multiple days following the dose. This suggests that near-infrared is generating a long-lasting photocatalyst that hasn't been identified, but well, we'll get back to that in a second. In spite of the potential parallels that can be drawn between sunlight and selective exposure to long wavelength ranges like an LED panel, there are numerous key differences. Both may have the ability to influence blood sugar, but sunlight has a continuous spectrum and is present for extended periods, while experimental long wavelength delivery has a reduced spectrum and is often delivered at high energy for short periods. Hence, it is possible that 670 and 850 nanometer exposure release a transient mechanism that is permanently expressed in sunlight, but at a lower, more constant level. So, yes, short bursts or use of lasers or LED panels can impact you immediately and systemically, and even have impacts for days following dose. But what if we did lower dose, consistent exposure out in the sun? You're likely to get better results, A, because you're getting the full light spectrum, not just the near infrared, and you're exposing yourself the way that is evolutionarily conserved or that has been part of life for as long as life has existed. So I would say, it doesn't have to be either or, it could be both and, right? Let's get our sunlight as much as possible. And then at nighttime, or if we have the means to also have an LED panel or laser or some other device that puts out these wavelengths, let's use that as needed or as desired as well. Or in winter, or if you live in a part of the world up near the Arctic Circle where it's dark for a long time in parts of the year, then you're going to want the panel because you're not going to get the sun or have the opportunity for it. So there's opportunity for both, but we always want to do the natural thing most and first, and then use the man-made stuff as needed. So I hope this excited you as much as it excited me because, we're looking for ways to optimize our health that are inexpensive, safe, and widely available. Well, there's nothing that fits that bill more than sunlight exposure. And so again, independent of vitamin D, the sun has many health benefits, and this paper helped show you some of those. So get your sun. Let's open it up for questions.
Okay, just for clarification,
Mhm.
in the middle of the day, being fully clothed is safe practice, like because we've talked about before how the middle of the day sun is the time that you get exposed to the other rays that create the sunburns that aren't good, right? So
Yeah,
this is still saying that if you're clothed, it gives you a protective barrier against getting sunburn, but you're still getting the benefits of being out in the sun to help your blood sugar and your mitochondria, etc.
yeah, good job. Yeah. So
Okay.
the clothing would block the damaging short wavelengths that don't pass through the body, but it's not stopping the long wavelengths that are healthful. Yeah, you nailed it.
Well, I'll just have to go outside in the middle of the day more now.
Well, I mean, again, if you're going, and we've talked about on multiple videos, the best way to know is the sun safe or unsafe from a sunburn, cancer, skin damage perspective is to look down at your shadow. And if your shadow is taller than you, like it is in the morning or in the evening, then that's okay. If your shadow is shorter than you, then that's the damaging sun. So if you can get all the sun exposure you need in the morning and evening, long shadow sun, then you may not have to go out midday. But yeah, if you do go midday, covering up will prevent the burns, but still allow the long wavelengths through. And it's interesting too to piggyback on that. I've I've made a video on this, but it's been a long time. There's research showing that green spaces, because if you think about hunter gatherers, right, or peoples who are outside all the time, what do? They take a midday siesta. They get in the shade. They get out of the sun. Well, there's research on forest bathing and green spaces showing that even though you're in the shade, the green, like the leaves and the plants, are still reflecting the near infrared light. So you can be out of the direct sun and still get the near infrared light from the reflections. So if you didn't want to be in the direct sun with clothes, because it's way too hot, you could still go into the shade and still get the long wavelengths and still not be in the dangerous sun.